Evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. We're going to talk about critical minerals in Africa for the next 20 minutes or so. So you'll see that we're a tin, copper and zinc exploration company. We're active in the Democratic Republic of Congo. You can see from that bottom picture that the copper is actually very photogenic. That's probably about 10% copper, so it's quite high grade. So we've been drilling this since we came to the market a year ago. I'll skip through that. It was Pathfinder Minerals. I think I came here just less than a year ago to report on the successful RTO. So we reversed into a Canadian company called Rome Resources, which had already drilled a number of holes in their licenses in the DRC and come up with some really good tin and copper numbers. And so we brought them here. They had a bit of a problem in the TSX getting traction in terms of investors looking at Africa and looking at tin. The investor population here is much more amenable to looking at Africa. And so we managed to raise 4 million straight off, started drilling straight away. So in August of last year, we had 3 or 4 drilling rigs come in, and we've been drilling essentially ever since, with one small interruption, which we can talk about. We also had a strategic investor come in December. The money actually arrived Christmas Eve, which was quite nice, another 4 million. And this strategic investor is a DRC mining company with some joint ventures with Ivanhoe. So quite an interesting investor. They came in and took 20% of the company. So as I say, we've been drilling ever since. Pathfinder had a legacy issue with a Mozambique license from years ago, and we've managed during the time to get that agreed. So that's now parked. There may be some money coming back to shareholders of Pathfinder as of September 2023, but that's not really the main part of the business. That's kind of parked. We drilled 26 holes. We drilled 5,000 meters of core. We've found a very wide mineralization zone in a prospect called Montagoma, over 200 meters wide. And as I said, it's tin and copper, but also with some silver in there and zinc. So it's quite a complex polymetallic system. And we're going to complete our drilling in a couple of weeks' time, and then the remaining assays will come through and we will produce a resource estimate in September. That's the plan. The board is essentially a combination. There's 3 geologists on the board: myself, Klaus Eckhoff, the chairman, Mark Gasson, the COO. Klaus and Mark came from the Rome side, so they were involved. They've been involved in DRC for quite a long time. And Jamie Anderson, Australian national, who's our man on the ground in DRC, again, very experienced in getting things done there. It is quite a challenging jurisdiction, as I'm sure you would think it would be. And we're helped by a number of non-execs, and Phil Knowles, who's the CFO, who actually is here. He's off duty, but he's here. So it's a really good team, good technical team, and a good DRC experience. So we look at the 2 commodities, the 2 key commodities that we are going after, and tin is really very interesting. I mean, tin at the moment is $33,000 a ton. It has been the best performing metal on the London Metal Exchange this year by a long way. And it was identified fairly early on, some years ago now, by MIT as being one of the critical metals that will be most affected by, or most in demand from, the electrical transformation of the energy networks. And so as that goes on with EVs, solar energy, et cetera, and advanced computing, then this demand profile is looking to really grow. And International Tin Association is estimating that it will grow by 40% over the next 5 years or so. And again, that's due to this advanced technology and various computing requirements. Supply side is subject to squeezes because it's quite a small market. It's a relatively small market. We're next door to Alphamin, which we'll talk about, which is the highest grade tin mine in the world. They're 8 kilometers down the road, and they provide about 4 or 5% so a single mine can produce about 5% of the world's tin. And therefore, if a mine goes down, or if there's some other issues, it does mean that the market is quite susceptible to spikes in price due to supply squeezes. And the second one is copper. As I said, we've got a lot of copper in the Montagoma deposit there, and this has been subject to, there's some real short-term aberrations in the copper market due to the 50% tariffs being threatened by the US government. Whether it'll come to that is another matter, but what's happened is that spiked the copper market. The Chinese electricity grid company is basically the largest purchaser or largest user of copper in the world, increased their usage by 25% over the last year. So there's definitely upward trend on the copper market as well as the tin in terms of demand. And you'll see on that bottom right there, a third of this, Reuters reporting PwC just a few days ago, a third of chip production could face copper supply disruptions. So that's copper and tin, both looking like they're being squeezed within the next 10 years. So both of these commodities have a really good forward projection in terms of demand and therefore price. So we'll look at where we are. We're in the eastern part of the DRC. The red star is the Rome project right next door to Alpha Min. The other stars on that map are actually projects that our team have managed to discover, develop, sell, and monetize, and make a lot of money at in the last 15, 20 years. So there's a lot of experience in monetizing projects along the way. So we're operating, it's remote location, it's in the jungle, it's helicopter operations. We have a permanent field camp there, basically from the last drilling and through now. So as I say, we're nearest operation is Alpha Min, that's 8 kilometers. We use their airstrip. And the interesting thing recently about Alpha Min is the majority stake has just been purchased by IRH, who are the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund. Very interesting. They're moving into, they've got a big copper mine in Zambia and they're moving now into tin. So that's really good, a good move for us. And the other thing that's happened recently, of course, it's not actually signed up, but it's the push by the US brokering the DRC and Rwanda agreement. And part of that will be the US having access to DRC minerals. At the moment, there's very few American companies in the DRC. They just don't have the experience or expertise. But that's going to change, and that will change the landscape for the better in terms of the business confidence, etc. So I think those are two really good pointers for us going forward. So operations, I'll click this, we've got a nice little video. Hopefully the sound's off. So we've got 3 units on site drilling at the moment. The picture on the right is the core handling facility. So all the cores come in, as I said, everything's helicopter support. So everything comes in and out by helicopter, and our samples then go to the local regional centre and then down to Johannesburg for the assay. So it's quite a complex process, and it does take a lot of time. We've shipped some metallurgical samples to Canada. That's quite interesting because what we're doing there is trying to look at how we can extract copper, tin, and zinc all together in this process, rather than it just being a tin mine or a copper mine, to actually take advantage of all the 3 commodities as they sit there. So that's some really quite nice flying by our ex-South African military guys. So this is what it looks like geologically. This is a cross-section from southwest to northeast, and so vertically through the ground. And you see those, the pink purpley areas are effectively the zinc and some copper. The tin itself is in separate zones, and the tin and the copper together in some other zones. So it is quite complex. It is a very wide system of about 200 meters wide. We've just, in the last couple of holes, found a new tin zone on the northeast side. So we are drilling, our last 2 holes that we're drilling in this campaign are targeting those 2 question marks down there. So we will see what we get there. And what's going to happen is that we will incorporate the assays from these holes and the work from the metallurgical study that we're having done in Canada into the resource assessment, which is coming out, planned to come out in September. Because in Montagoma, we've got the three different commodities. We look at what the relative value is. I mean, we see, this is kind of indicative, but we see 7 times more copper than we do tin and 7 times more zinc than we do copper. And if you look at the relative values of these, they all have a significant amount of value. Although zinc obviously is less than $3,000 a tonne and tin is $33,000 a tonne. So there's a big push really to make sure that we maximise recovery of all these commodities because they've all got value. The other prospect is about 2 kilometres to the west of Montagoma, but this is much more similar to the Alphamin project insofar as it's pure tin. So there's no copper or zinc. It's relatively straightforward. You can see 3 dipping. This again is a vertical section through the rocks, northwest, southeast. You can see these dipping higher grade shoots, and that makes Kalai, this one, relatively simple to assess. So this will be coming out as well in September in terms of the resource assessment. So we'll have these 2 prospects both assessed for their volumes. There is upside here because we had some geochemical, some basically soil sampling, the first thing that was done here. And those anomalies extend to the northwest and the southeast. We've only drilled the core part of the central part. So there is further upside there in Kalai as well. And this is what we're doing over the next few months. So although, it's summertime, we're still pretty active. So we're just wrapping up the drilling in July. Will be one of the reasons that there's 2 reasons for pausing actually. The helicopter's been in the bush for 3 years and it needs to go on a big service. So what we're going to do is we're going to pause drilling and allow the assays to catch up. So there's 3 or 4 holes at the moment that are still in transit to Johannesburg that haven't been assayed yet. So we don't know what the numbers are. We've got an indication from our XRF, but we don't know the real numbers. So we're using August to get those assays done and the MET studies in Canada. And then by September, MSA will put out a maiden resource, and then we'll decide what to do next. So I think we'll see some nice numbers. Can't really estimate what they will be at the moment, but September's not too far away, and that's what we'll be aiming for. I'm doing quite well. So summarised, 2024 was very transformational for both companies. For Pathfinder, going from what was basically a moribund cash shell into a company that's been drilling for a year on a high-grade tin and copper project. And for Rome itself, by coming to London, raising the money, finding a strategic investor, that's been very good as well. As I said, 8 million raised to date. These drilling programs have been successful. We have had, I'll preempt the question about security, we have had issues in March. We had a shutdown for about a month, ourselves and Alphamin both. There was essentially the M23 rebels overran Goma. We were operating out of Goma. So then we had to move to Bukavu, then they overran Bukavu, then we had to go to Kisangani. So it's been quite a fluid process, and passing a trigger point, both Alphamin and ourselves shut down for a month. Since then, I think what's happened is there's been the peace talks, there's been more rapprochement really between DRC and Rwanda than there ever was before, and that's all calmed down again. So since late May, we've been operating, I won't say as per normal, because we're still having to use Kisangani, which is twice the distance for helicopters, so we're using quite a bit more fuel than we like to, but we are getting the job done. So we've drilled all the holes that we wanted to, and now we've got to find out exactly how much we have in terms of tin, copper and zinc. As I mentioned before, tin has a very strong forward demand curve, as does copper, and that's reflected in the price estimates going forward. We have a lot of zinc. Zinc is also very commonly associated with germanium, which is, so we're having some samples, in fact they've arrived in Brisbane now, so they're in Australia being sampled for germanium. We don't know whether that's going to come to anything, but germanium is $1 million a tonne, so it's worth looking at. And that's commonly in these zinc sulfides. So as I said, we've got this recent DRC news with the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund coming in and the DRC peace agreement and potentially US involvement in minerals. Those are good for the business confidence. We have strong news flow, certainly for the next 4 months. And effectively what we shall do is we'll come back in September after we have the resource report and tell you what we think we've found. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you. Okay, a question down the front here, please, Steve. Thank you. Wait for the microphone, please. Thank you.
In this location, you have established the presence of these materials and the extent, but when it comes to turning it into a productive mine, not only development costs for the mine, but also transport to where you want to export it to. What's sort of total cost and how long will it take for you to recover it?
Okay, so the way that we're looking at it is, if you look at Alphamin, as I said, 8 kilometers away, they've got between 7 or 8 years of mine life left in their resource. So, we are developing a resource here, which would fit over the next 4 or 5 years. If we would develop it at Montagoma, it can go through, it's about a $5 million road cost to get to Alphamin. It's the same materials that would go into the same processing plant and be exported the same way that Alphamin exports. They basically export by road through Uganda to Dar es Salaam and then out to Asia. So although clearly it takes a long time, it is a well-trodden path, and Alphamin have had a really good success rate in getting materials out. So we would effectively be using that same route out. In terms of costs, Alphamin, that's obviously our benchmark because they're the nearest producer. They run at about $12,000 a tonne in terms of production cost. So, that's a really good margin. If we say today it's 33,000, so it's about a 20,000 margin per tonne of tin concentrate rather coming out. We think that we could probably start a small scale production of tin because we're at the surface. Now, Alphamin are down at 300, 600 meters. Our tin starts at surface, so we could actually start what the DRC call a small scale mine project, without that much capex, with maybe 20, 30 million of capex. But then the fact that it's geographically on a hill and at surface means that, the actual open pit extraction of this is going to be very, very cost effective. So I think there's quite a few things that point to it being a relatively low cost operation. I don't really have the numbers at the moment. We might get them from MSA a bit more because they're going to look at the economics a bit during this process. So maybe in September we'll have some better idea of profitability, but it's looking pretty good at the moment.
So you are looking in terms of something like 15 to 20 million to start producing?
If you went the route of the small scale operation to start, yes. I think you'd probably end up, at the end of the day, you'd probably end up wanting to do a full scale development. You probably would bypass the small scale and then put that all through the Alphamin facility.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other mines or projects getting funding or starting to start moving into production in the DRC?
It's quite a patchy landscape, really. The only real, a lot of the gold projects have got funding, and they've been producing, and obviously there's the copper belt down in the south, which is a long established copper belt down in the south. But the whole of this eastern part of the DRC is, full of minerals, and it is early days in terms of the exploration. So I think, as I say, this US thing will hopefully help bring people in and bring some money in and start further development. So it's a niche in terms of, you know, operating. You've got to know what you're doing, and clearly our team do. So, yeah.
Okay. Question here, please. Yep.
When you said the strong demand outlook, the element, excuse me, the LME tin futures price seems to be in backwardation. So where does that reconcile? I appreciate the futures price will incorporate many things, not necessarily to do with the energy transition.
I think the thing is, I mean, we're at least 5, maybe 7 or 8 years away from production. So to over science it, I think, is quite difficult at the moment. I mean, it's a bit like the oil price. You know, if you're developing an oil field at $50 a barrel, and how are you going to predict what it's going to be in 5 years' time? You just got to look at the trends rather than anything else. I fully admit that you can't predict it. Otherwise, you know, you'd be a very rich person.
You mentioned the potential for US involvement in the country. We also read a lot in the past about, you know, China's Belt and Road Initiative. Are there many Chinese on the ground, or is the Chinese state active there?
There are in the Copper Belt, and clearly they are in Zambia. I mean, very heavily involved in Zambia, just on the other side of the border, the southern part of the Copper Belt, but not really. I mean, we do have some contacts, and we will be talking to people. Klaus, particularly because of his 25 years in the country, has got some lined up. So I wouldn't rule out the fact that we may find a Chinese strategic investor that actually ticks all the boxes for us.
Yeah. Is there a question over here? No. And I've got one final one. And if I've written it down here. Yeah, you mentioned the kind of the next 4 months of potential news flow. Assuming you get positive drill results that you'd like to see, what would you like to see for the 8 months after that? So kind of your year outlook. What would you hope to be saying in a year's time?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is approach it such that we add value now, put the value on with the maiden resource, and then go to someone like IRH or another strategic investor to take us to the next level, which would be basically drilling enough to do a feasibility study, add value to the project. So it's slightly incremental, but that would be the big push. You know, I mean, say we have X value now with a feasibility study, then, you know, it's a big multiple of value. So we're looking for a strategic investor to help us do that, and that's probably another 5 to 10 million of investment that we'd be looked for over the next 12 months, assuming that the resources tell us we've got lots of value to go for.